You know, there are many ways that you can describe depression. It's hard to imagine what it's like for those who don't know it, but there's been an attempt. J.K. Rowling, I don't know if you know this or not, but she experienced bone-jarring depression for about a year and a half, and she attempted to describe it in her books through the Dementors. Dementors, you know, suck out the life and suck out the soul of the person, and depression for her was very much like that. It just seemed to suck the life right out from underneath her, and so she tried to describe depression in the language and the metaphor of Dementors. Winston Churchill, who led Britain through World War II, also suffered from pretty severe depression, and he called it the black dog that haunted him. This black dog continued to pursue him throughout all of his life, and he was known as a man who had to wrestle with depression all of his life. And there are other attempts. If you watch and look at bumper stickers as you travel around, those are sort of philosophical statements that have been slapped onto bumper stickers. And there has been some attempt to describe the despair of life which so many people experience and which all of us at some point in our lives experience. And maybe one of my favorite descriptions is, there is no gravity, the earth sucks. Another one I saw not too long ago is, what if the hokey pokey really is what it's all about? Fairly depressing. Now for me, I have to share with you that for the majority of my life, I have struggled with incredibly severe depression. It has defined who I am, and it has impacted my life in ways that I sort of appreciate and in ways that I resent. The diagnosis for me just 2 years ago was bipolar II disorder. Now, bipolar I is much different. Bipolar I is where the mania is much, much higher. So that if I had bipolar I, oftentimes what I would do is I would buy 5 new cars for friends at Christmas time. Or I would fly to Europe because I had the plan that was going to turn around the whole economic mess over there, and I would rack up my credit card debt. I have bipolar II, where the mania isn't as high, but I do have 50 domain names registered, because there had to be some exciting new thing out there. And so for me to describe depression, and again, it's hard to imagine unless you've known it, but I like to use the story of the Apollo 11 moon landing. Now remember Kennedy, he rallied the whole country to say we need to beat the Russians in the space race, and it was a national sort of endeavor to get the first man on the moon. So this occupied our time. And finally, over some trial and error, they decided that it was time to land the first men on the moon. And here they were in the Apollo 11 spacecraft, and here is the interchange between Houston and Apollo 11.
Here, Houston, 400 feet and hovering over. See the lunar surface now, about 300 feet over 150 feet hovering. Houston, see the lunar surface even closer now. We're at about 50 feet. Houston, contact.
Contact? I mean, you have just landed on the moon, the first human being to land on the moon, and all you could say is contact. I mean, what in the world? Where's the passion, right? If you were the first man on the moon, wouldn't you have said, hey, we landed, Houston, we're on the moon, baby. We are here. Passion. Where the heck is the passion? And if you've been married a long, long time, you often can experience a lack of passion in your own life. You could be in the bedroom going,
honey, I'm hovering 10 feet and over 5 feet. Contact.
Where's the passion? And for me, depression is a depletion of passion. So that anyone who experiences depression or has a bout of depression, for me, it's like taking the air out of a balloon. Passion seems to wane when you are depressed and when I am depressed. So for my description, I use a lot the Apollo 13 mission to say, where's the passion? How do you get passion in your life? Now, as I was preparing this, I thought I wanted to speak primarily about mental illness and about depression and why depression is going to persist. It's not going to go away. And the reason I believe that is because we have to have depression in order to experience the full spectrum of human emotions. But rather, I thought I wanted to speak to myself and say, how in the world do I get myself out of depression? And I have discovered over the years that there are pilot lights. And they may flicker barely inside my soul, but there are pilot lights, sustained pilot lights, that if I can ignite those, ignite passion in my life. And because for me, depression is a depletion of passion, these pilot lights are critical for me to get out of the depression. And the first pilot light to ignite passion in our lives and in my life is humor. But however, we're the unhappiest nation that ever landed on soil. The U.S. is a very, very unhappy nation. In fact, The Economist even said, we are one of the unhappiest, most miserable people on the face of the planet. In fact, if you go to the bookstore today, there are about 4,500 books on happiness. Compare that to in 2002, where there was only 50 books on happiness. It is a huge topic for us. It is a huge issue. By the way, do you know who the happiest country in the world is? Denmark. And the reason Denmark is so happy is their expectations are so doggone low. That if anything good happens, they're pumped about it. So how in the world do we infuse passion? Because it seems as if even our culture somehow is depleting us of passion. And the first pilot light, as I mentioned earlier, that ignites passion in life is humor. Humor is an incredibly sophisticated method that we have to deal with the issues of life. In fact, that great American philosopher Jimmy Buffett said that if we all couldn't laugh, we would all go insane. And I love that because we live in the tension between what is our current experience and what ought to be. I mean, we're human beings and we feel and sense this disconnect between the way life is and the way life ought to be. And it's within that disconnect. Incongruity is one of the main components of what makes things humorous, is where we find ourselves and is where humor does its work. That's why we love the satire. We love the Colbert Report. We love the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Those are ways for us to laugh at very serious issues in the world. A friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, he said, humor is the most sophisticated defense mechanisms that human beings have ever developed. And if we can somehow laugh at the pain in the world, not to mock it, but somehow to approach it with humor, it sort of diffuses it a little bit. Depression oftentimes is a way to laugh at the human condition because we're so broken deep down inside, and humor helps to do that. Humor is the heart sweating. I love that. Humor is the heart sweating. It's a release of tension when you laugh. And when you laugh, it releases all kinds of feel-good chemicals in the brain. And one of the ways to ignite passion, and passion needs to be sustained, I'm convinced of it, if we want to make changes in the world, we need to ignite the pilot light of humor. But another pilot light for me that I need to ignite to bring passion back into my life, to somehow bring meaning into the depression that so often can deplete it and so easily ruin my life in so many ways, is hope. Hope is an incredibly important component of being human. Because if we lose hope, in survival terms, you can live 3 weeks without food. You can live 3 days without water, but you can only go 3 minutes without hope. Now, if you've been to a dog race and these greyhounds are trained to race around the track and people place bets on them, the way they get these greyhounds to race is they lock them into their cages and they have a mechanical rabbit. And wherever you go around the country, this rabbit's always called the same name, Rusty. And the announcer for these greyhound races will go, "Here comes Rusty." And that rabbit, that mechanical rabbit will go, they open up the cages, and then the greyhounds, they go after and they race. That's how they get going so fast. They have had moments, though, where these greyhounds have actually captured the mechanical rabbit. And once that happens, these greyhounds never race again. Because I think they figured out they've been duped. This isn't a real rabbit. What in the world have I been running all these years for? And you know what? It's often the same with all of us as human beings. What kind of rabbits do we pursue? And so often we pursue the rabbits that don't make any difference and that can deplete hope in our lives. Someone said once that life is tough. And I want to read this for you because it's a great example of life. Life is tough. It takes up a lot of your time, all your weekends, and what do you get in the end of it? I think that the life cycle is all backwards. You should just die first and get that out of the way. Then you live 20 years in an old age home. You get kicked out when you're too young. You get a gold watch, you go to work. You work 40 years until you're young enough to enjoy your retirement. You go to college, you party until you're ready for high school. You go to grade school and you become a little kid and you play. You have no responsibilities. You become a little baby, you go back into the womb, and you spend your last months floating, and guess what? You finish up as a gleam in somebody's eye. I love that. But if you look at the statistics, and America is incredibly unhappy, the gleam seems to be gone. And the way to bring the gleam back is to somehow find hope again, to pursue pursuits in which love is truly exemplary. To be involved in pursuits in which love is truly exemplary, that brings hope, and that ignites a gleam in our eyes. It is not the way we deal with our human condition that is our basis for hope. Hope is our basis for how we deal with our human condition. And without hope, we lose that passion for life. And so one of the pilot lights of passion is hope. But it's also honesty. We need to be doggone honest about the situation we find ourselves in and the condition that we find ourselves in as human beings. And if we can just admit to ourselves that life is pretty hard, all of a sudden that releases a lot of pressure and tension. I have a friend right now who is in hospice care. Suddenly, about November, he was diagnosed with cancer. And it spread so incredibly fast. And I sat down with him. We've had coffee many times between the diagnosis and his time in the hospice. And we sat down and we just honestly talked about where we were at. We talked honestly about the disease and what it was doing. And it somehow released him because he accepted the fact that this is where he was at. And honesty was very important for him. It was important for him that his family was very honest about this particular disease. And you could see that there was a sense of meaning that came into his life because he was honest about what it is that he had. Muhammad Ali was on a plane. And you know Muhammad Ali, if you remember him, he was a pretty cocky boxer. He thought that he could do anything, and he was above most people with his ego, huge ego. And he was on a plane, and the captain put on the fasten seatbelt sign, but he didn't put his on. And the stewardess said, sir, you need to put the seatbelt on. The captain just put the sign up, and Muhammad Ali in his cocky manner said, Superman don't need no seatbelt. And the stewardess, without missing a beat, said, well, Superman don't need no plane either. Truth will shatter any illusions that we might have. And the truth of the matter is, if we're honest, we're all going to die. One of the healthiest things we can do when we get up in the morning is to look in the mirror and tell ourselves that we are going to die someday. Because that honesty will bring a passion into our day and bring a passion into our life. It's not a depressive thing at all. Steve Jobs, at his commencement address in 1997 to the graduates of Stanford, said that one of the most important things we can do is be honest about the fact that we are going to die. He says, remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. The Stanford graduates got that, and it's been quoted and re-quoted over and over and over again. And Steve Jobs, as you know, was diagnosed with cancer, and we're not quite sure what his condition is now. But he said, the fact that I know I'm going to die opened up a whole world of possibilities for me. So honesty is another pilot light that ignites passion in our lives and in the world. The third pilot light of passion, beyond just humor, beyond just hope, beyond just honesty, is help. How many of you love the Beatles? I'm into the Beatles big time all of a sudden because they've been opened up on iTunes and I download all of their songs. I found out that John Lennon struggled most of his life with pretty severe depression. And he worked that out in his songs. He worked that out in the way that he communicated musically to people. And he wrote the song, Help. And help is an important component of lighting the pilot light of passion.
Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me?
Help me, please. Someone help me. I need lots of help, by the way. Someone help me. You need help in order to keep the pilot light of passion sustained. And depression has an incredibly tight logic. You can get stuck in there, and I can make a great case. I could just show you the newspaper, I can have you watch the news, and I can make a very compelling case as to why all of you should be bummed out. And it's hard to get out of that tight logic of depression. And when I had the bone-jarring attacks, I would be curled up in a fetal position, and I could not raise a finger to help myself. But what made all the difference in the world is somebody came in and helped me. My best friend in college, he could tell when I was starting to go down into this funk. And he would kick me up out of the couch and he said, we're going for a walk. And he would have Swisher Sweet cigars. I'll never forget this. He would take me for a walk and we would smoke Swisher Sweet cigars, and that made all the difference in the world. It brought a light back into my eye, a gleam back into my eye, a passion back into my perspective of life, and it's because he was there. What are your Swisher Sweets? Who are your Swisher Sweet cigars? We all need help. We need to ask for it, but we also need to be open to it. Give people the privilege of ministering to you. That's made all the difference in my world of depression. To approach it with humor, with hope, with honesty and help. I want to end with a story about a woman who was having a bit of a spat with her neighbor. And she looked out of her kitchen window into the backyard and she saw her 2-year-old German Shepherd shaking the life out of her next door neighbor's rabbit. And this was a horrible thing to see because she realized that there was tension and this isn't going to help the relationship at all. So she had a great idea. She went out and she had the dog release the rabbit. She brought this bloodied and now dirty rabbit into the kitchen and she cleaned it up. She took the dirt off and the dried blood and she let it go down into the drain. And this now dead rabbit she put up, and with a hairdryer she blew the fur, puffed it up. It looked pretty good. She was pretty proud of her work. And she waited for just the opportune time when her neighbor was going to leave, and she went over and in the back patio of the neighbor's house in the cage, she propped up the rabbit and she left. About 20 minutes later, the neighbor came home, and a little bit after that, she heard the blood-curdling scream from her next-door neighbor. She went over playing the concerned neighbor, and she said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And through gulps, her neighbor said, "It's our rabbit. It died 2 weeks ago. We buried it, and it's back." Now, I end with that because there's an emptiness. And if you've experienced depression, the statistics will play out that in this room, with the number of people that we have here, there is about 3 to 4 people who are struggling with very, very severe depression. The rest of us also experience depression, but not on such a huge level. However, if you look at our culture, it's all bipolar. Just look at the stock market. It goes from the highs to the lows. Think about the atmosphere of our country. We have high moments and we have incredibly low moments. Most of life is lived bipolar. And the way that we fluff that up, we could say we're dead inside and we can just fluff it up from the outside, but nothing's going to change. This country isn't going to find happiness unless it works on the internal parts of us. None of us is going to find joy and any kind of meaning in our lives unless we ignite the pilot lights that are there. And the pilot lights that are there can make all the difference in the world. We don't have to puff up. We don't have to fluff up. But it helps bring meaning and sustenance and substance into our lives. And for me, in my bone-jarring depression, it was humor, hope, honesty, and help. Don't fluff up. Become alive on the inside.